I still don't know what day it actually is. They're all running together. I think that this is a Monday, but it feels like in the middle of one game, they win over Oregon in the Rose Bowl, and before another, the Cotton Bowl against Texas. That's usually a time when you'd have a stock report. So that must make this a market-moving Monday. That's Bill Landis, Jeremy Birmingham. I am Austin Ward. Let's do some stonks.
Let's do it.
We haven't stonked in
stonked in a while.
It is really weird. I was thinking during the press conference on Sunday, like Ohio State will have, if they make the run here, it'll have played Saturday, Wednesday, Friday, Monday. What the hell's happening?
Throw in the holidays and travel. It's very confusing to me. My brain has no concept.
Not to mention all of the NyQuil and DayQuil and everything else.
Yeah.
Also got those drugs in the system.
Stock up on
stock
America's
up
pharmaceutical companies.
It's a perfect time.
This Stock Watch is brought to you by one of those companies.
Whoever they are. Anyway, Burn was killing some time for you so you can take the first stock.
Is there Donovan Jackson available?
I felt like we might talk about Donovan
Man's making himself some money, I think, these last couple of weeks. I was talking with, I can't remember if I mentioned this. I apologize. I think I may have said it. I don't know on what show. I was talking with Justin Fry at the Rose Bowl Media Day.
It wasn't this show.
Okay. It wasn't this exact episode. Talking with Justin Fry at the Rose Bowl Media Day, and I said, like, have we talked enough about what Donovan's doing? And he said, no. Like, we've made it seem far too simple that Donovan Jackson, All-American caliber guard, could just step out to left tackle and maintain that same level of play in the middle of the season against the likes of Penn State and Tennessee and Oregon and Michigan. Like, there's some real elite pass rushers, and now he gets to face even more in this Cotton Bowl game against Texas. He's just been awesome. Like, he had those two, I think it was two, maybe three, like kind of iffy snaps against Abdul Carter in very obvious passing situations where it's sort of like, what are you going to do? And then I don't think he's
not alone in
his first game at it.
Yeah, in his first game at it. And then I don't know that he's had like much in the way of bad reps since then. He's been really good in the run game. I actually think his athleticism at tackle in the run game has helped Ohio State unlock some of the stuff they've done these past two playoff games with the counter schemes they're kind of relying on. And then as a pass protector, I wondered if he might have, the requisite length to handle some of these more speedy guys that he's going up against, and he definitely does, and he has the footwork to match with it. So I sense there was some, I don't know what the right word is, like reservations, mild concern, whatever, relative to Donovan Jackson's draft stock when this conversation was broached about whether or not he should move to tackle. And I think the results to this point have improved that draft stock. They have not hindered it. Like they could have. If he would have went out there and got smoked, I absolutely understand why that was the case. But he's done nothing but help himself in the eyes of the NFL. But more importantly, I think he has been like by far. Well, I don't say by far because Jeremiah Smith and Caleb Downs like this, but he has been, in my opinion, the MVP of Ohio State's second half of the season with what he's done at left tackle.
He's certainly in the conversation, especially because of the chemistry, leadership part, and the willingness to sacrifice. I think we were all going to probably talk in some form.
Of the humans on the team, he's the MVP.
That's a good way to qualify.
Oh, yeah. Okay. That's
human MVP. Yeah.
Humanoid
MVP.
And the reason I think that this is even more pertinent, why it's worth giving additional credit and piling it on, is that I thought in the first half of the season, we'd look at the PFF grades, Bill, and I'd be like, why are they so in love with Donovan Jackson? Because I felt like the first half of the year was, pretty inconsistent and not nearly as dominant as we were expecting, or he was getting praise for at the time. And I thought, boy, there were opportunities where Ohio State was having some breakdowns, and they were coming on the left side of the line. And I didn't think that Josh Simmons was necessarily responsible for that. And I didn't think Seth McLaughlin was responsible for that. So by process of elimination, without even knowing their playbook, I was pinning some of that on Donovan Jackson. So I had some uncertainty going into November, as I think everybody reasonably should. How is this going to work? Because I didn't think he was playing the best guard of his career. And now you're asking him to go out there and do it at tackle. But boy, has he answered every single challenge that has been thrown his way. He was close to perfect in terms of playing left tackle against Oregon, and really some situations where
against the Twin Towers,
it could have gone against them based on the way Oregon was being hailed for their defensive front. And they have good players, not suggesting that they don't, which I think adds value to what Donovan Jackson has done beyond that. So what is that going to mean for draft stock? I don't know. He's still an NFL guard, right? I don't think anyone's going to play him at tackle. There's a ceiling to how high you can be selected at that position, but it's giving talent evaluators and general managers a lot more to think about in terms of the overall makeup and also the athleticism that you mentioned.
When you're a guy that can play 5 positions in the NFL in a league that routinely just carries 7 offensive linemen, you become exceptionally valuable.
He's going to play a long time.
And my question is, if Ohio State were to finish this out and somehow pull a national championship out of this season's hat, is it Will Howard or Donovan Jackson who moved up the most in NFL draft stock conversations?
That's a good question.
I think it's Will Howard.
Probably Will Howard.
I was also going to have that be part of our conversation on the Stock Watch because we were talking about that a little bit in the hospitality suite at the Rose Bowl last week. It's like, where is Will Howard going to get drafted? That was before he played against Oregon. And they can't just take one game, right, and move him up the draft board. But if he's the 5th best quarterback in this draft class and teams are starting to think, well, let's say 4 go again in the first round, I don't think that anyone would let him sit there until the 4th or 5th round personally, based on the way that he's carved up really good defenses. And yes, it's an advantage to have Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka on your team and Carnell Tate and Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson. That makes it easier, perhaps, than in some other spots. But the decision-making he's shown, the accuracy he's thrown, the poise that he has shown, all of these things are what the NFL teams are supposed to be looking at. Donovan Jackson was going to be drafted in a middle round no matter what. And he may move up because of what we're talking about to the 2nd or 3rd. I don't know. But Will Howard was talking about a 6th or 7th round pick to potentially as high as the 2nd. Maybe that's not likely. Maybe that's the ceiling. But I think he would certainly take that. He's improved his stock much more, in my opinion.
I just wanted to research it because we were talking about this, as you mentioned last week, and we brought up Spencer Rattler, and he was the first non-first round pick quarterback taken in his draft, right?
Yeah, like 4th round, right?
He was picked 150th, so 5th round. And he's 6'1", and
and his college film was terrible.
And his film in college was bad by all accounts. Anyone who's ever met him hasn't.
You just watched the QB1 show.
Doesn't have much good to say about him. Yeah, he may have a little bit more of a lively arm than Will Howard, but if you had to line up a series of attributes and characteristics, is there any other than lively arm strength? Is there any other category that Spencer Rattler would win over Will Howard? No. I'm struggling to see one. Maybe he's a little bit more elusive in the pocket. I don't know, but Will's pretty good at creating space for himself. I think Donovan is probably a high 2nd-day pick at this point, and I think Will is now probably a high 3rd-day pick at this point, which I don't know that that's ostensibly that different than where he thought he was going to be a year ago.
I don't think he would have got drafted last year, so I think it's a huge leap.
But it's also a reminder that Drew Aller should definitely not return to Penn State.
Yeah, that'll be an interesting thing.
Because this draft class, compared to next year's draft class for quarterbacks, is favorable. And Drew Aller is drawing a lot of buzz. But that's a different show. Is Will Howard done are we just we're just going on that path, right? Because
that's where I thought it was worth having that conversation because we had it not on the podcast daily, and I thought maybe we could have it here, especially
this is the podcast.
I know, based on the way that he played again against Oregon. It wasn't a fluke, and
he did it in like 10-degree weather, and then I
think the weather. Yeah, I think the different elements will help him. Yeah,
and I think it's going to be fascinating at some point when the books are written and when the season's over and the conversation about the evaluation in the 2nd quarter on November 30th, because I believe everything about that game is a incredible aberration based on what he did in every other performance for Ohio State this year, including even one that was maybe up and down at times against Penn State. But like we talked about the toughness and the rushing ability and all the things in that game, like that wasn't an amazing statistical output for him. But still, you looked at it, and everything that happened in that game was wildly out of character from Ohio State's offensive execution and game plan, and the way that Will Howard threw the football. He had already to that point had 6 games completing 80% of his passes or more. And what has he done since then against Tennessee and Oregon? Even when there weren't tighter windows to throw in, he's hitting deep balls at a level that we've not seen throughout the year because they weren't simply dialing him up. The long-winded way of me saying, I think something was more seriously impacting him in that game. Personally, I don't have I'm not reporting that. and they cleared him to go in the game, and he did. But he was not the same version of Will Howard that we've seen in every other game. And I think to continue to hold that against him is missing how good he has been and how he himself has elevated Ohio State's offense.
Yeah, and it's important to understand, Ohio State didn't let Marvin Harrison go back in the game against Georgia when Marvin was demanding to go back in the game 2 years ago. So it's not like the medical staff is playing loose with the regulations.
They haven't in a lot of other situations anyway.
So I don't want anyone to just assume that they were reckless with Will's
No,
health.
I don't think they were. I just think you get rattled, you're not yourself. I don't think he was himself that day.
Maybe those cobwebs didn't
Yeah.
clear all the way, and then the play calling I think maybe was a result of knowing that as well. But irrelevant, whatever.
But I guess I think he has made a jump in these 2 games. Like he's been very good this year. I don't think we've discussed enough how good he's been this year. He was excellent in the Oregon game. He was good in the Penn State game after the initial pick 6 in that game.
Mm-hmm.
If you go back through the first 12 games of the season, I don't think you can find 4 throws like the 2 touchdown passes to Jeremiah and the two passes he's thrown down the middle to Emeka Egbuka. That is where he's taken the next step. Those are like NFL caliber throws. Yes, he completed 80% of his passes. How many of those were like tight window? Like, and it's great. Like, he's an efficient quarterback, and that's what Ohio State needs him to be. I'm not.
But I think this started actually at Northwestern. I think this ascension.
The ball that was a G Scott. That was a really good throw.
Middle,
yeah.
The Carnell Tate touchdown, the first touchdown that got overturned that he threw to Jeremiah. Mm-hmm. Like, all of this was
he started to calibrate it a little better, I think, in the latter half of the season, and then I just don't think was in a position to do it against Michigan for whatever reason. But so this is another way. Like, I don't know that a lot of the stuff he's done prior to these 2 playoff games screamed NFL to me, but he definitely has in the last 2. So he's helped himself probably more than anybody on the roster in that regard.
There's also, I wouldn't be standing here saying he's going to start for an NFL team next year, mm-hmm. or maybe even ever. I don't know what the next path in his development will look like, but in terms of bringing someone into a camp and signing them to a contract and having someone who could be a long-term backup and someone that you trust to do the right thing on and off the field moving forward, Will Howard is going to give you that. Mm-hmm. And he can make Chase Daniel, I think, is he still collecting checks in the NFL? Like,
probably.
You can't tell me that Will Howard can't make that career long-term in the NFL and step in. It's again, I think that's the difference. Like, don't know what it's actually going to be like because the team that they go to, the organization, the talent that's out of some people's hands. I would have thought that Justin Fields was going to be way more prolific than he has been once you leave Ohio State. But it is clear that Will Howard has not only enhanced himself at Ohio State. I think you have to say the reverse is true as well, which is that Ohio State has helped him, and he is helping Ohio State in a way that we maybe didn't even think about a year ago. And it was like, well, he doesn't have to be a superhuman. He doesn't have to be Superman. He's doing really good things.
Yeah. I was thinking about G. Scott for this stock watch anyway, especially as we're talking on Sunday about the way Texas's defense potentially could mimic Michigan more than anyone else has been able to. And if you are able to put those safeties and play the deep safeties, and a tight end like G might be a pretty valuable commodity this week for Ohio State. And then I started to think about how G got here with Justin Fields in 2020, played with CJ, played with Kyle, and now with Will. And I wish I could have asked him about that on Sunday as far as what makes Will the right quarterback for Ohio State. I've said it all year. I thought he was the perfect quarterback for Ohio State. And now we're seeing that. But I also, G is, he stock up on G. Obviously, the play to start the Oregon game, we saw him getting a little bit emotional on Sunday as far as the journey he's had to take to get here. And I just think he's going to finish things out in a big way. So I'm going G-Sif.
Well, I can't shake this feeling. Were you talking about G. Scott just now?
I was talking about G. Scott, and then we were teleported.
How did we get here?
Outdoors. Weird things have happened all month. And here we are.
You got G. Scott to almost cry.
I did, and I wasn't intending to get him to cry on Sunday, but
it kind of seemed like you were.
I just thought, we don't get the opportunity. We don't get the opportunity.
You usually admit that you're trying to get him to cry.
I wouldn't have minded trying to get him to cry. after holding up a national championship trophy or something, but I wasn't trying to do that on Sunday. But I did think that the opportunity to talk to him when we did have that opportunity on Sunday came at the right time because, again, the way that Ohio State opened up that game against Oregon seemed pretty intentional. Like, we're going to get this guy involved. It was a play that Will Howard talked about that they hadn't really been able to get clicking all week, and then they got it to go. And I just think it's a sign of an important piece of this offense that hasn't really been unleashed yet in the way that we saw Ohio State against Clemson in the 2021 Sugar Bowl, where you had Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson and Jamison Williams, and Ohio State came out and threw to the tight end over and over again to soften up what was a really aggressive Clemson defense. And I think that there's a recipe in there to follow for this week. Now that Will Kazmarek is back healthy, G. Scott has earned not just the opportunity to catch passes in the passing game, but he's done that because he's been so consistent as a blocker and so much better as a blocker. And I just think his story is one we've, over the years, laughed about at times because he was such a doofus about a number of things. And that's not saying he didn't go through challenges and hard times. I mean, his mother passed away, and that'll mess with a young person, messes with an old person. So it took him time to get to where he's at as a human, as a player, as a tight end. And right now, I just think that he's a guy that you can count on, which is what I was trying to get out of him on Sunday. It's like, can you believe that you're the guy they can count on? Like, you are the emotional and spiritual leader of this team? How the hell did that happen?
Yeah, I mean, he talked about just one specific example, which was the headbutt a couple years ago against Michigan, but by no means would that be the end of that list. And I think it'll be a fascinating conversation after the season, after his career winds over. And G. Scott, he was reflecting on that a tremendous amount on Sunday already, and he has throughout this year, and what has prompted a lot of that change for him. But boy, there were 6 opportunities throughout his career where I thought, well, that's the end of the road here, and both sides need to move on. The fact that they've seen it through, and that G. Scott is the player that they turn to, they put the football in his hands on the first play of the game of the Rose Bowl, is significant and frankly, almost hard to believe.
It's cool. Yeah, it's nice to see him finish his career this way. I tend to agree that he'll have a pretty big role to play in this game against Texas and potentially in a national championship if teams do whatever they can to try to limit Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka. I wish them good luck in that, but they'll try, no doubt. But G has shown himself to be a pretty explosive playmaker, even on the few targets that he does get.
I just, to make one final point on him as a person, there are a lot of times in covering Ohio State football where we are around the greatest athletes on the planet, and a lot of times they have a very faux humility about them. I don't think that's the case with this. Seems like a person who has just had a completely life-altering last few years, and it has changed him for the better in many, many ways. So I hope I hope my stock pays off for people who are into the bold prediction side of things. But I'm just glad.
Those are two different shows.
I'm just glad for him.
It's been a meandering.
Well, bold predictions. I'm making a prediction now.
Got it.
That I'm going to boldly predict something about G. Scott in this game whenever we do bold predictions this week. And I don't know what day that will be because I don't know what day this is. Is it still Monday?
It's a meandering Monday, and it's even more confusing because we started it inside the Woody and now we're outside. I don't know how that happened. And we've also been meandering through the topics because I don't know that we've really...
We're going to finish
We've just all taken the same 3 players to talk about.
We're going to finish at the shot.
Yeah. We're not going there.
It's a long way over there. I don't know.
So we've talked about those 3 offensive players. We got to mix in a little defense and Silver Bullets, don't we?
Lathan Ransom, baby. That guy's playing out of his mind. That hit. Did he knock Jordan James out of the game? Was the last we saw
I don't remember him playing after it.
Okay. I think Jordan James waved the white flag, the Dan Lanning white flag.
Came from opposite hash, just stuck him in the hole, was a 2-yard run. Lathan Ransom, and it also hadn't occurred to me that he was back on the Rose Bowl field after breaking his leg there a couple of years ago. That full circle moment just kind of escaped my memory as we were preparing for that game. But he shared a really nice tweet about it afterward. Clearly, it meant a lot to him to play that well. But he's been playing well all year, and it's like Caleb Downs has earned every bit of notoriety he's gotten this year as a He was a unanimous All-American, I think, right? Or at least
Yep.
a unanimous All-American. Like, I think he is the best safety in the country. Lathan Ransom is right there with him. And that has, I think we've done a nice job of trying to remind people of that, but I don't think we can do it enough. And the way he's played in these playoffs, like the physicality that he's brought to the defense, the way he's helped set the tone, the way he's made opponents tap out of games, I don't think you can say enough about the impact that he has on Ohio State's defense. I think from a leadership standpoint, he's going to have to be big again in this game because Texas is going to, target its tight end quite a bit. It's going to want to try to run the ball. I know it didn't run the ball great against Arizona State, but that's a big part of what Texas wants to do is to get that play action RPO game going for Quinn Ewers, and Lathan Ransom is a guy who's equipped to I think take that away from Texas in this game. So the arrow's been pointing up all year, really. I guess with the exception of that game that he had to miss, we weren't sure exactly how he would come out on the other side of it.
That's
it turns out
remarkable.
He came out on the other side of it like playing the best football of his career.
Yeah, I think that it's not a coincidence that if you look at Ohio State, Texas, Penn State, Notre Dame, you have 4 teams with 4 of the best safeties in the country leading their defense. And Ohio State has 2 of them, which is a testament to McArary in year 1.
Does that mean you have 4 teams with the best 5 safeties in the league?
No, I mean, I think that Malachi Starks, and you can make arguments about individual players elsewhere, but I think between Xavier Watts and Jaden Reed and Makuba at Texas, like those are 3 of the 5 best safeties in the country that don't play for Ohio State.
I think it's important all the time when you are critical of someone in your analysis, your evaluation, observation, that you be fair when they turn it around. And Ohio State's defensive line and Larry Johnson have been absolutely phenomenal in these last couple of games. And I think you can the second half of the year, it was difficult for me to figure out how much credit to give to that front when many of the pressures and sacks were coming from Ohio State ramping up blitz pressures and getting Cody Simon and Sonny Styles involved. And it's not to say that the defensive linemen weren't important to that because they were being asked to do some different things than they have throughout their career. But all of them collectively, and that starts with the position coach. We talked about the re-engineering in the middle of the year. There appeared to be the disconnect. Whatever has happened between Jim Knowles and Larry Johnson, whether that's an agreement on scheme, whatever, kumbaya moment, I don't know. I'm not privy to those defensive staff meetings. But they're doing things differently than they did in the first half of the year. The buy-in from the Rushman to Larry Johnson, I don't think has ever really been in question. The tight-knit connectedness of that room has always been clear. They've always sworn by Larry Johnson. I think there have been times throughout, let's say, Jack and JT's career where maybe that was to the detriment of the defense as a whole, that there was so much deference to Larry Johnson, potentially at the expense of the defensive coordinator or the scheme as a whole. I'm not here to relitigate any of that as much as I am making a point that clearly they are doing things at a high level and it must be called out. What they did against Oregon was not based on blitz pressure and using the linebackers. There were times when it was a 3-man front and Jack Sawyer was unblockable and creating opportunities for teammates. So Jack and JT, 4 sacks in the win over Oregon. It's not just about that. Tyleik Williams, Ty Hamilton, you can see them having the impact that they were always designed to have. I'm going to have to give credit to the development plan, to the coaching execution, to the scheme, to the whole 9 yards. If I'm going to call it out when it's not great, it would be a disservice and dishonest for me to not tip my hat when they're doing it right. So Larry Johnson, the whole Rushman enterprise, kudos to you guys because that is pretty phenomenal. And 6 games ago, 7 games ago, 8 games ago, there's no world where I would have envisioned it playing out the way it has.
It's when we needed you most, you gave us our best. You gave us your best, and that is certainly happening right now. And I don't know if it's scheme. I don't know what it is. I know that whatever was happening prior to November was not working, and it is working now. And
it's the same people, and that's why I think I don't know if they would even be able to put a finger on it themselves of what exactly changed.
I mean, I do think a lot of times, and we've talked about this over the past few years with defensive linemen around Ohio State, when you're that close, Zach Harrison, the conversation with Zach Harrison all the time, you're this close. Once you get one, it seems like you all of a sudden move that much quicker. And once Jack Sawyer is moving that much quicker, then so does JT. Once JT's moving so much quicker, so does Tyleik, so does Ty. Oregon had negative 23 rushing yards. And I know that includes...
And you, just be clear, you want to be on the positive side?
Numbers generally work that way.
Got it.
Like
the only thing you don't want to be positive for is a drug test. Everything else...
Or STDs.
Medical tests, positive is negative. But rushing yards, you want to be positive, not negative.
Okay.
Yeah, so...
That's a good shorthand.
I mean, they're playing lights out. And I think it's a matter of... Ohio State has played, if you took 100 certified ball knowers, 100 CBKs, and you asked them to list their top 7 defensive lines in the country, almost everyone would include Ohio State on that list. But I think Ohio State's played the other 6, maybe 5 of the 6, because they didn't play Ole Miss. Other than that, I think they played everyone else that it would be on that list of top 7 defensive lines in the country. And every week, we go into it talking about how good the other defensive line is going to be and how challenging it's going to be for Ohio State. And no one's talking about, well, actually, Oregon, who we all said and maybe had the best offensive line in football, got their asses kicked by Ohio State. Now, Texas, if their offensive line is healthy, which I'm not sure if it's going to...
not. Yeah.
Then they are in the argument for the best offensive line in the country. So I think that these guys are just sick of hearing about other people's defensive lines and realizing, hey, what about us? It isn't fair.
Well, they had to go out there and live up to the hype, and I think that they are now. Like I don't know that that's always been the case for this group. Like they've been,
not.
It definitely wasn't.
The floor has been still pretty good, but we're talking about excellence and that this collection of talent. I think we all expected that it would eventually get to this point. It's probably taken a year longer than we thought it would. But
or 4 years.
Or 4 years longer than we thought it would. But it's happening at a pretty opportune time. They're, I think, without question, playing like the best defensive line in this playoff. They look like the best defensive line in the country, and I suspect Texas will have just as much difficulty trying to block them as Oregon and Tennessee did.
Concur. I think that Alex has re-earned the nickname Sonny.
Oh wow.
How generous of you.
Yeah.
You've been waiting till now? What more did he have to show you?
Well... Nothing. I just kind of forgot about that whole thing until now. Forgot about that joke we had on that bold prediction show a few months ago. But he's Sonny Styles again. And he is, listening to him talk at the podium on Sunday, like you're hearing a guy that is a confident kid.
It wasn't the way he sounded in September.
No, and it's not the way he looked in September. He looks like a grizzled NFL veteran, and he's 20 years old. And he scares me. But
well, you were the one that chose to call him Alex.
Yeah, well, he deserved it. You're going to get birth names, son. He's playing really, really well. And I know that we never give Cody Simon enough conversation.
Speak for yourself.
Because Cody Simon is playing maybe better than any Ohio State linebacker since Darren Lee in 2015.
Yeah, that's right.
So, and I don't want to gloss over that, but what Sonny's had to do this year and learning on the fly, making the switch from safety to linebacker, and he is now he's no longer a liability at linebacker. He's a full-on weapon. And him and Lathan, every week, it seems like they're having a competition between who can knock someone out faster. And
maybe at one point they can get there together.
That would be dangerous.
Yeah,
Good luck to that guy.
I don't like those types of hits because generally that little dude in the middle gets out of the way and they donk each other in the domes, and no one likes that.
You don't want to dome donking.
No dome donking. I just think Sonny's playing lights
one
out.
Of these.
And, as we head into the offseason, whenever it hits, this is not like last year where there was all these guys that we were expecting to have decisions about the NFL. There's just 2. It's Sonny and Davison Igbinosun, and anyone else that leaves is going to leave for NIL pastures that are greener or playing time opportunities because they're not going to play here. Sonny and Davison are the only 2 that have an opportunity to really leave for the NFL draft early. And he's priority 1 to bring back.
Yeah.
So
no doubt.
And that's not something, even all the hype and all the accolades coming out of high school and all of the expectation, first 2 years certainly did not live up to them. And no one should have thought he would, based on the fact that he skipped his senior year of high school and all of the other adjustments, position coaches, all that other stuff. He's a man now, and he's dominant, playing dominant football.
Yep, and Buckeyes are going to need all those guys at their best on Friday night in the Cotton Bowl against Texas. Another day closer to it. This was a market-moving Monday. At least I think it's Monday. We'll figure it out as we go. Maybe we won't. But this has been The Daily, looking at Ohio State and Texas, that matchup with Bill Landis and Jeremy Birmingham. I am Austin Ward. We'll be back in here later, snow permitting, for some snap judgments after an open practice viewing period. If you've got some snow coming, stay safe, and we'll talk to you later.